Hello and welcome to Freedom from Fear, a German New Medicine podcast. I'm your host, Ashlee Newberry.
And I'm your other host, Abigail Puccioni. Please be aware that nothing discussed here on this podcast should be taken as medical advice.
Consult your trusted professionals and your own inner knowing before making any health decisions. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our podcast, Freedom from Fear. Today, we are interviewing our guest speaker, Laura Prentice. We're so happy to have you here, Laura. And Abigail, you want to introduce her?
Yeah, thanks so much for being here. So Laura has a background in supporting women and loves learning about new ways to grow and heal. She's been a birth keeper, fertility awareness educator, leader of women and girls circles, and now hosts an annual women's festival in Texas.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So today we're going to talk about the conflicts that Laura has experienced and kind of explain a little bit about the background of German New Medicine, and then have Laura share her stories. So the first one that we wanted to go over is called either the sexual frustration conflict, and it affects the cervical mucosa. It's also called a sexual conflict, depending on which resource you're looking at in the German medicine world. And this conflict affects the cervical mucosa. And so during the conflict active phase, you have cell loss. And this cell loss is like imperceptible. Usually you don't feel it, see it. If you were to get a pap smear or something, they might not even notice it. But then during the healing phase, you can have cell growth and bleeding or other discharge symptoms. And it can look a little bit different for every person. It's not always exactly the same formula. But I'd love to hear your story with this, Laura, and what your experience was with this conflict.
Yeah. So I started having really light periods in 2017, and that continued for a while. And I thought it was odd, but I wasn't too concerned about it. But it was noticeable. It was like a marked lightening of my periods.
Yeah.
Around that time, I started working at a birth center, and the midwives I was working with were like, "Oh, that's not a problem. Don't worry about that." That never really felt true to me. I was like, there's something that's different. It didn't feel normal. And then later, it was in 2020, right after the lockdown started, that I started noticing really scant cervical fluid. And I was a fertility awareness educator, so I knew that cervical fluid was the indicator of fertility. And so then I also knew what was normal at that point in terms of like menstrual flow, heaviness. So those two things, I was like, something's not right, but I really didn't know what to do with that. And then, so Ashlee, I was working with you and you explained about like ovarian loss conflicts and sexual frustrations. And in 2017, I was in a very brief relationship with someone that I felt really strongly about. And then she broke it off and like moved. And it really, really hurt. And I felt I felt such a loss. I felt perhaps sexually frustrated too, but I experienced it more as a loss. And you and I, Ashlee, talked about how that has been like kind of the thing that I wanted in my life more than anything, was to have this partnership and then to be able to have children. And so it felt like a loss, not only of a potential partner, but also the potential for having children.
Right.
And so realizing that was huge. So that was one thing. That was what really started the light periods. Then in 2020, I associated or attributed the scant cervical fluid to like the lockdowns, and my body was just like, this is not the time for you to reproduce. Like, it's not safe.
Mm.
But in thinking back, right before the lockdown started, I had flown across the country to be with someone that I thought was my partner. And it just did not work out that way. Like we ended on really, really unpleasant terms, and I flew home. Like I ended up in her guest room in tears. It
Yeah.
was so heartbreaking. And that was exactly when that scant cervical fluid started, was that second, like my perceived like loss of that relationship. And so that has continued up until really now. This past like 2 cycles ago, I had my first like more normal period. So when I say light, like it was 2 days of like very, very light bleeding, like one day of maybe needing 2 pads and another day of like spotting. And I was like, that's not okay. Like I used to have a much
Yeah.
more robust bleed.
Yeah.
And so not this most recent, but a month before, I had like a much more normal, and I felt so excited, and I was like, wow, this is really, really is resolving by my awareness of that. And then this most recent period was a full 3 days of normal bleeding, which might not sound like very much to somebody else, but that is within the realm of normal menstrual flow. So anyway, so that happened. And then right now I'm in my fertile window, and I have fertile cervical fluid for the first time in almost 4 years.
Woo.
Yay. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. So
So
that's
exciting.
yeah. Do you want me to go into like the mental changes that I, kind of helped me get there? Or that, I mean, that's kind of
Yeah,
the
sure.
story.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, really the main thing I think was just realizing that that's what was going on in my head, and
Mhm.
like how much power I was giving that story.
Mm,
And realizing it was huge. But I think what has really changed recently is just the realization that it's okay for me to want to be in a relationship, but I don't want to need to be in a relationship. I want to
Mhm. Yeah.
know, like want it, but not need it, and just feel fully at peace and happy and joyful in myself, and not be doing things so that I'm potentially in a relationship, or healing so that I can have children someday, but doing all of these
Mhm.
things for myself and my own
yeah.
health and well-being and just wholeness. And I think that's been the biggest shift.
Yeah, that's so powerful.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, most people feel this way, even if they, are not as in tune with their bodies as it sounds like,
Yeah.
you've been paying attention to all of
Mhm.
this. And our psyches are so amazing and powerful. And to see that shift within your perception is really amazing, because Dr. Hammer talked a lot about the practical solutions and getting to that, like, practical thing, which is great. And sometimes before we're able to do that, we need that perceptual shift in order to be able to even get to the practical resolution from like a healthy place that's not, I need this. So
Yeah.
that's awesome.
And I think it's really interesting too, how you described the conflict, what you were going through at the time, and just kind of relating it back to, what does a sexual frustration conflict mean? And I think some people might take that as like, oh, I'm just sexually frustrated because I want to be with this person and I can't be, but it actually has a lot more to do, like this flavor of conflict with who is my mate, who am I
Yep.
going to have, children with? Like that's pretty much the primary, which is exactly fitting with what you described. Like, not only did you kind of lose a partner relationship, but also that potential, partner to have children with, right?
Mate,
So I
yeah.
think, right, yeah, exactly. And so that's biologically what that, program is all about. And the whole purpose of the program is to, like Ashlee said, there's cell ulceration and conflict active, and then the replenishment and the healing repair phase. And the purpose is to make the tissue stronger and, better than before, so that you're more likely to get pregnant after resolution, which is what you're describing with, okay, now I have, and, since you're a fertility like expert, now I have this healthy, cervical fluid, which, like you said, is an indicator of fertility. So the program, served its purpose. And it was just, your biology trying to help you out.
Yep, totally.
Yeah. So cool how the body works. So amazing.
Yeah.
I'm honestly still like stunned with this information sometimes, just how like on point it is. Yeah, with our experience. It's really cool. Was there anything else that you wanted to add in conjunction with this conflict, Laura?
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to say is that as a fertility awareness educator, I tried a lot of other things. I knew about the herbs. I knew about diet and, I Weston A. Price Foundation style eating and Mayan abdominal therapy, acupuncture. Like there are so many different things that I was recommending to my clients, and I tried all of those things. And now, like, I've actually stopped teaching fertility awareness and giving women this advice because I just don't feel good about like saying, just go to an acupuncturist and it'll solve your problems. Like not that that's a bad thing to do. Like I do know that they can have really good outcomes, like for fertility. Like anything I think can help because you feel like you're resolving your problem. But was the thing for me, just changing my understanding of the situation and understanding what was going on.
Yeah, I think that's super important because, we're often emphasizing that, different modalities, that's not what's going to necessarily resolve a conflict for you. But I think it's also important to bring up that, like you were saying, maybe acupuncture can help someone, chill out about things, and it helps them, feel like they're doing something good for their body. So those things can definitely be supportive while also not being about like, related to the actual root cause.
Yeah, exactly.
Just had this feeling that there was something deeper going on. Because it still didn't go away. And I think
you were doing all the right things.
I was. Yeah, I was following my own advice and other practitioners' advice, but not seeing real results. I just knew that there was something deeper. It felt like putting a Band-Aid on something that, just not addressing the root cause. And this really is what changed when I was able to change my perception and have these realizations. And not that those modalities don't have success. Like I do think that women can have results from these things, whether it's because they feel taken care of or they feel like they're taking steps in the right direction. But yeah, just realizing the root thought patterns and like the conflicts that were at the root of my particular symptoms was huge and the thing that helped.
Yeah. I mean, anything that you're doing that, is helping to bring you peace, that's helping you chill out about things is likely inadvertently helping to downgrade or resolve conflicts. So yeah, thank you for sharing that story. That was great.
Thanks.
Yeah. Well, and for so many of us too, especially the most interesting thing about German medicine is that, we're all living according to the biological laws, whether we know and understand them or not. And so most of us are activating and resolving biological conflict shocks unconsciously, right? So we don't realize the connections of, oh, I'm having this pain, or, I'm having this symptom, and we aren't necessarily able to connect the dots to, what was going on right before that. And so being able to share these stories like this is so powerful, because we are building that awareness within our own, life experience, to see like, oh, I'm actually creating this and I'm really powerful and I don't have to keep doing this, by getting to the root cause and resolving things, whether that's right, practical resolution or perceptual. So yeah, super cool. So the next conflict that we wanted to talk about was the uterine conflict. There's a couple different flavors of this conflict, but for this particular story that Laura's going to share with us, it's the implantation conflict. And so during the conflict active phase, you have cell growth. And then during the repair or the healing phase, you have cell breakdown. And the point of this conflict is to basically help you hold on to the baby easier, right? Or like get pregnant and like stay pregnant. Like that's kind of the purpose of this program. And the symptoms of this can look slightly different from person to person. But what happens is when you have the healing, you can have like discharge because the cells are getting broken down by bacteria that you don't need any longer because you've resolved the conflict. And so you can have discharge that smells funny or looks funny because that's the uterine cells that you're discharging that you no longer need because you resolved the conflict. So I'd love to hear your resolution story about this conflict and kind of, what you were experiencing, at the time of the conflict.
Yeah, so the symptom that was present for me with this conflict was a yeast infection. So it was very itchy, uncomfortable, with a bit of discharge. And that's something that I had struggled with kind of around, I was going to say it was around the same time that I first had the light periods, but actually it was a little bit before that, starting in probably 2016. And it would just be kind of off and on that I would have the symptoms of like itchiness and discharge. And back then I would, I was learning about herbalism, and so I would do all of the things, and like yogurt, coconut oil, how to arco bark, like so many things. And eventually I think I went to like an actual doctor and got antifungals, like tried all these different things, and they would kind of help. Anyway, I pretty much haven't had that in a while, but recently I had a flare up of it, and I talked with Ashlee about this, and because it was one that I really wasn't sure what the source was, like what was the conflict shock with the yeast infections. And I realized that it was the trigger for me. It had become a track, which I don't know if y'all have talked about tracks yet on the podcast. A little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
A little bit.
Well, anyway, for me, the yeast infection flared up after a coworker said something along the lines of, like, do you want a partner, or like, do you want to get married? Do you want kids? And however she said it, it sent me on this track of like, I should have done this by now. Like, I felt like, oh, like I need to like get this partner like in order. And it was reminiscent of the sexual frustration conflict with cervical stuff, but it was a little different too. It's a similar realm, I guess.
Yeah.
Now thinking about all these conflicts that we're going to be discussing today, a lot of them for me relate to partnership and expectations of relationships, like romantic relationships, because I'm learning that's such a big deal for me, or it has been like this primary thing that I've wanted so much in life and not really ever had a great long-term relationship. So anyway, symptoms were a yeast infection. And it flared when I was in this situation with a coworker who brought up this thing that sent me down this route. Then I was able to remember, like, no, like I'm whole in myself. Like I don't need this other partner. I know that I want that, but it will happen in the right time for me. And so that's the resolution. And I have done things to like make it feel better, like using yogurt or coconut oil topically, but the resolution is just knowing that it's, like Ashlee helped me come up with the affirmation. It's kind of a silly one, but it's great. I am whole. I am the whole cake, like unto myself. I just get the whole cake. Like,
I'm the whole cake. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I
and
think,
knowing that sorry, go ahead, Abigail.
oh, no, I was just going to talk about how you were right in saying that like pretty much all of these programs, these conflicts that have to do with our reproductive system, all boil down to who's my partner, who am I going to have, children with, starting a family. That's like the whole vibe of all of these different conflicts.
Yeah,
So.
exactly. And biologically, that's what we are as women are designed for, is to be in partnership and to be pregnant and have children. Like that's one of our main biological purposes, and is to procreate. So, of course, many of us have this, very deep desire for that, and it makes sense that then that's what most women's conflicts are about, some flavor of this stuff, at least the people I've worked with so far. But yeah, the statement we came up with is super fun. I am the whole cake. And I love this concept of, right, being whole and complete within yourself, so that when that partnership is ready and comes into your awareness, into your life, that you're able to just know it within yourself, and instead of this really like, I need this, which then, at least in my personal experience, I've attracted less than ideal partners with that perspective. So that's super exciting.
And Ashlee, do you want to describe like why? Because, she mentioned that she went on an antifungal and then it, obviously got better a little bit. Like, do you want to describe why the antifungal would help in light of, what's going on in this conflict and the helpers that are in action?
So when you're in the resolution phase, for this particular program with the uterus, you have tubercular bacteria and fungi that actually kind of like if you think about Pac-Man, they like kind of eat up the old cells that you don't need anymore. And then that's when you have the discharge, right? So if you were taking an antifungal, Laura, it's kind of getting rid of those helpers. So then you're not having the healing symptoms, right? And in Western medicine, that's seen as a good thing, right? Because, oh, your symptoms went away. But we know within the lens of German New Medicine that most of the time symptoms are actually the sign that you've resolved something, and they're good. Maybe they're not comfortable or most enjoyable at times, but it's actually a sign that the body is resolving something and things are, moving in the right direction. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So the whole purpose of this adaptation is to have the cell proliferation in the conflict active, and then cell breakdown in the repair phase, the healing phase, to kind of, break down those extra cells that are no longer needed. So your body, during this process of having the discomfort, the itching, the odor, whatever, it's just a sign that that tissue is kind of going back to normal.
Yeah. So cool.
Yeah. Very cool. Is there anything else that you wanted to kind of add about that? I'm also curious to know about what tracks you discovered with that, because you mentioned that it was like a recurring issue, like the recurring yeast infections. And so did you kind of notice if something would happen, like, someone making comments like from that initial conflict, or a particular thought pattern that you had that was kind of the track for having those become a recurring issue.
Yeah, I mean, it for me is whenever I either someone will say something that then leads me to go down this road of you don't have a partner yet, there's something wrong. Everybody around you is partnered up and you're you haven't done it yet. Doesn't even have to be somebody saying something like that, though. It can just be I get into a headspace. I notice that when I'm feeling just a little down in general, like something's not going well in work or whatever, I have this thought pattern of like, oh, life would just be better if I had a partner.
Yeah.
And a baby.
And a baby for sure. Yeah, which definitely is not true. But yeah, so having that realization and knowing that no, it's not, that's not accurate. I would be just as sad if I had a partner and I was feeling sad in life. So that's kind of like when I noticed the track, and being aware of it has definitely helped me not go down that road and just feel my feelings and not make it about something else.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting too to consider how, these conflicts that we experience, these biological conflicts, are not necessarily just about like, oh, what we feel emotional about or what we think we want, or, like on a conscious level. They're, evidence of our biological desires and the stuff going on subconsciously. So, that's why someone could have a conflict like this, even if they consciously don't want a child right now, or maybe ever, but yet their biology wants it. Like there's something in them that is this kind of, primal need, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so I guess we can jump into
silence.
the next, we can jump into the next conflict, which is morsel conflict. And so this is actually an indigestible morsel conflict. And her main symptom is, as she will describe, is constipation and a few others. I think you said like bloating and pain and stuff like that. So with this program, there's the cell proliferation in the conflict active phase, and then cell breakdown in the healing phase. And yeah, so do you want to jump into sharing about how this, kind of came up for you and manifested?
Yeah. So my main symptom for this was constipation, and it started right after I had an appendectomy in 2016. And I thought that the constipation was because of the appendectomy, because I was very much in holistic thinking. My dad's a chiropractor. I've just grown up with like the medical system is terrible. Like that was really my story. And I don't not believe that in many ways still, but anyway, so I had fully attributed all of my symptoms to the appendectomy. Which is its own conflict, but I don't really want to get into that because it's a whole separate thing.
Sure.
But yeah, so I thought it was about that. I had constipation was the main thing, and a lot of stomach pain every time I ate, and a lot of bloating. So I tried a bunch of different diets. I went gluten-free, I tried dairy-free, I did keto. I was in ketosis without trying to be because I wasn't eating any sugar or fruit. I tried to just stop eating at some point because my stomach hurt with like everything that I ate.
Wow.
And then I was vegetarian at the time too. So limiting like grains it severely limited my diet. And then eventually someone gave me some broth, and that was the first thing I ate that didn't hurt my stomach. So that was cool. And then I stopped being vegetarian. So that was also helpful. But I tried so many things. The moral of that story is I tried so many different diets, and then eventually realizing that it wasn't about the food was a big deal.
Oh, gasp.
No way.
Right. Yeah. So the conflict that it actually ended up being was a surprise about a relationship right before. It was either right before or after the appendectomy. I was dating this woman, and our relationship just wasn't what I expected. It was um, like she didn't really want to have physical contact. Like we were dating, but like for me, the morsel that I couldn't process was either a relationship that I didn't, it just wasn't what I expected.
Yeah.
Or it was like the physical touch, like not getting that. And yeah, the relationship didn't work out. And that was all like kind of simultaneous with the getting my appendix out, possibly related. I'm not totally sure, but I do think that that was the beginning of that intense constipation and bloating and pain that only went away years later, which is, it was so long. I'm so grateful I don't have that anymore. One of the other things that really helped, Ashlee and I were working through this particular conflict, and it had mostly resolved, but occasionally I would have constipation. I did have one bout of it on a trip, again, to visit a potential partner.
I'm seeing a
That
pattern.
trip, a little bit of a pattern. Yep. That trip did not go again as planned, as expected. And we didn't like have the physical contact that I was expecting. And I was constipated again. And I was like, man, what's going on? I've like worked through this, but it was the same type of situation. And so the affirmation, the statement that Ashlee and I came up with for that one, it was so simple. It's just like, pooping is easy. And
That's great.
It helps. And also just knowing that if I ever do struggle with that now, I know it's going to go away because it's not related to anything like it's not, I haven't done anything wrong. I'm not like sinning because I've eaten this food. Gluten's not trying to kill me. And it's just something that my body.
That's a big shift.
Yeah.
A huge shift. Yeah. Like losing that fear of, oh, am I doing something wrong? Are these foods like kind of, attacking me? Maybe that's the wrong word, but
like
are
out to
these
get
foods
me.
what I can't digest? Yeah. Are all these things out to get me? And, they're poisoning our food and our soil, I mean, not saying that that's not true, but this is a really cool story. And I feel like also it's important to note that this adaptation, the biological purpose of it, is to actually help you be able, like it improves your digestive juices or whatever you want to call it, like with the cell proliferation and the conflict active phase, in order to help you better absorb and digest this indigestible situation, this morsel, this, wanting the physical contact and not getting it, this thing that you want and are not getting, like, you're trying to absorb this and accept it and come to terms with it, and you can't. And that's kind of the theme of this. And the biological purpose as to why this particular adaptation is what your psyche chose.
Yeah.
Yep.
Was there anything else that you wanted to share, Laura, about this one?
I don't think so. Yeah, it's
Okay.
just great to realize that pooping truly is easy. It is so great.
I'm curious about the timeline, like when the constipation went away and kind of what that was like for you, having this, working to downgrade and resolve the conflict while also, incorporating more foods and realizing that it's not the food, and kind of coming to peace with that, and, moving away from the fear, kind of describe what that transition was like in your life.
Yeah. Timeline wise, I'm trying to remember how many years I dealt with this because it was a long time. 2016 in the fall is when it started. It was definitely all of 2017. And then I started eating meat in 2018. But it was still definitely present that year. So at least 2 years I dealt with those symptoms. I did find a lot of resolution in like looking back over specific situations. This is before I learned about German New Medicine. I was just like, I think that it's related to, you know, something around my appendectomy. So I did some just like releasing of these situations. And then I was just like, I'm going to try eating sourdough bread. I think I can do this. And I really just decided that it was fine. I kind of was like, I don't have a problem with gluten anymore. And I just started eating it. The thing that I needed to do was just tell myself that it was fine. But what allowed me to really believe it was using, I used the emotion code, which is like just releasing trapped. I know, you know, GNM is not the same as releasing trapped emotions about things, but that is what I used in the moment, was emotion code to release these specific emotions around this situation. And that just allowed me, I think, to believe that I could do this, that I could just eat whatever I wanted pretty much. Gluten was kind of like my gateway drug back into normal eating.
That's amazing. And I love how, you know, because I think a lot of people have this similar experience where I know this was true for me as well. Like I kind of branched into the mind body realm and started opening my mind to that before I ever found GNM. And so I think that, you know, people are starting to realize, like, as they transition from the holistic world, you know, that, okay, certain things are just not making sense, not adding up. You know, they're starting to ask the right questions and kind of, you know, pick things apart, right? Poke holes in things. And I think a very natural part of that transition is getting into the more kind of generalized, you know, mind body world of like, oh, stuff that goes on in our life, you know, which involves emotions for sure, you know, it can affects the physical reality of our body. And I think GNM kind of expands on all of that and makes it a lot more specific in terms of, okay, well, exactly why do I have this symptom and not another symptom from this, you know, this
situation
experience that held a lot of emotions, right? So,
yeah, that's how it worked for me. And not being afraid of food really was a huge thing. Just knowing that it's okay. And that's still a surprise. And it's kind of confusing because I lived so long with so many dietary restrictions. I was vegetarian for 12 years, and then I was gluten-free for several years. And then I tried dairy-free and keto, and I just believed that I would never be able to live a normal life, like food-wise, because of these digestive issues. And it's been so freeing to not worry about that at all.
And here you are eating whatever you want and not having gut issues.
Yeah. And it's not like I still don't really prefer to go to McDonald's. Just
sure.
I just don't want to. But I really am trying to not see it as dangerous for my body.
Yeah, that's huge.
That's a big distinction. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so
sometimes I eat Wendy's and I love it and I don't have any symptoms and it's great. Like once in a while.
Yeah. I think there's a really big difference between, you know, avoiding eating certain things just because you don't really like it, or maybe it just doesn't taste the best to you because the quality is not the best, something like that, versus avoiding it out of fear that that food's out to get you, you know, and it's going to hurt you. It's going to cause a symptom. It's going to cause a disease. You know, that's kind of the distinction that we, you know, emphasize on here. So, well, thank you for sharing that story. Now we can get into the last resolution story you have to share, which is an attack conflict. So this is the old mesoderm tissue called the corium skin. And the attack conflict, sometimes it's also called a feeling soiled conflict. And in this program, there's cell proliferation in the conflict active phase and then cell breakdown in the healing phase. And also similar to the chronic yeast infections you experienced, the fungi and tubercular bacteria are what assist in the repair phase to remove those, additional cells that are no longer needed. So do you want to explain what your experience was like with this adaptation?
Yep. So same story, still about a partner, not the same story, but still about a partner. I had a relationship with someone and it ended pretty abruptly, and I felt so rejected and like disrespected in that parting.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised there weren't more symptoms, honestly, but the most noticeable one was this growth. It was on the like on my cheek, kind of just above my the left corner of my mouth. And I watched it appear, and then I was so curious about it. I think I had maybe a moment of fear, like, what is this strange growth on my face? But then I was like, I just left a really stressful situation. I think I know what this is about. It didn't look like a pimple. Like I don't get a lot of acne, but occasionally I'll get some pimples. And it had more of like a mole freckle quality, but raised kind of like a pimple. And I'd never seen anything like that, like on my face before. And it grew, and I was just like, okay, that's there. No worries. I think you're gonna go away, and I think we're all gonna have a good time. And I knew what it was about. I knew that it was about this situation, this feeling of just like, I know it's an attack conflict. I knew it was likely that same program. And I was like, yeah, it makes sense that I felt attacked. I'm still here. It's fine. And I've done a lot of just inner work on that relationship, but I'm trying to remember how long it stayed, because it's fully gone now. I thought I would at least have a scar or something, but I can't see it at all. It was there maybe 3 months. And then it just was gone. It just faded away. And that to me is like one of my favorite examples, because I didn't really do anything. Like I didn't have to figure it out. Like I didn't have to come up with an affirmation. I was just like, yes, I see you. I see this conflict, and I know what happened, and I know that I'm okay. And that's really kind of how I've started doing all of this. Like I don't, when I first started, I thought I just had to sit down and like figure all this out. And now it's just like, yeah, okay, I have some constipation. There's something going on, and it's okay. Like it will resolve. And if I want to, I can give it more attention, but I know now that like I don't have to.
Yeah. And also when it's so visible, you get to see it like, okay, like, building up, like that was the active conflict phase. And then when it faded, that was, it was resolved, it was done. And I think also you said something really important about not needing to figure everything out, like kind of having this knowing like, oh, I had this kind of conflict, but not needing to dive in and, find the exact moment of conflict shock. Like that can be helpful. But what I find is that for most like kind of one-time symptoms, like this is something that popped up. It's not like it came and went, came and went, came and went. And, like this recurring thing, like, maybe the recurring constipation is like a bit different because that's like a hanging healing, something that's like a recurring conflict in your life versus something that's just like a one-time, like getting the flu, right? Or having, some sort of like one-time symptom that you really haven't struggled with, like on a, chronically. And so I think that that's also a really good approach to have for like more of the one-time symptoms. It's like, okay, do I really need to figure this out? Because it's not like you were, stepping on tracks or anything. It sounds like you were in active conflict for what, about 3 months, and then it started to break back down. So does that track for you though with the timeline? That would you say that this was kind of, on your mind, that you were kind of preoccupied with this for about like a 3-month time frame?
That's a good question. because initially after this situation happened, I think I was upset for like a day. And then I was like almost manic. Like I was on this emotional high. It felt so like it was such a powerful experience.
Mm.
Not that it was pleasant, but it felt like such an opportunity for growth. That I don't know that I was consciously upset for those first few months. And then after that, I think I sort of like settled down and then felt it more, but not in an unhealthy way, like felt some sadness, and I don't know, but I think that's kind of how it went. I'm not sure that that makes sense, but that's how it worked.
It does. I mean, there's
Yeah.
a common saying like time heals all, right? And so I think a lot of people like this goes along with what you were saying about, I didn't really need to like figure it out and analyze it. And I think that that's true for so many conflicts that people experience, especially more the one-time ones and not chronic issues. It's just that, oh, time heals all. Like, this conflict happened, and it will probably be, at least subconsciously, kind of, a big deal. And, your psyche's handling it, your biology's, your tissue's adapting, right? And then it will kind of eventually, fade as other things, become more kind of prominent in your mind, and you're doing other things
Yeah, and
and
more
meeting other
important.
people. Right, right.
Yeah, for sure.
Totally.
And I
So
like
did
how
you notice with the cell loss during the repair phase, like was it sudden or did it slowly fade? Like did it fall off or was it more like a gradual process?
It was subtle. It didn't all fall off at once. It was more like a slower healing. And I didn't know if it would ever heal. And I just really didn't care.
Hmm.
that's
Which
key.
that really helped you. Because when we
Yeah.
get neurotic and we really care and give it a lot of focus and attention and we're like obsessing about it, which can be hard not to do in certain circumstances. I know I'm guilty of this too. But that is honestly like the best thing about resolving it is like, right, it just doesn't matter anymore and it's not bothering you anymore, right? Which is a way to release that and just, right, okay, then there's the resolution. So
Yeah. I think it actually made me feel just a lot of tenderness for myself. Because it was a physical reminder of something that I had been through that I think I really didn't, not that I didn't want to think about it, but I was just like, yeah, that happened. But then like seeing this physical manifestation on my face was like, actually, that was kind of intense for you. Like, it's okay that you feel some tenderness.
Yeah. Well, because you had said that you felt disrespected, which I think definitely fits in with the flavor of, attack, feeling soiled.
yep.
And so that would, make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, was there anything else that you wanted to share before we wrap up the episode?
The only thing that comes to mind is like in this last example, I was really able to not care about whether it went away or not. But there are certainly other situations where I can't not care, like in a yeast infection or like I had a rash on my legs, which was a separation conflict. There are times when it's really hard to not care that a symptom is there.
Yeah,
for
And
sure.
so like Ashlee, you've been really helpful in telling me just wear pants all the time if you have this rash on your leg, like don't pay any attention to it. And that's been really helpful. Not that you ignore, the reality of your body, but it's been helpful to just be like, okay, that's there. Yeah. Just do whatever you have to do to feel okay. And then
yeah,
it will resolve.
I
yeah,
think it
and
all.
go
Go
ahead.
ahead. Go ahead. I was just going to say it all comes down to trusting the body.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say something similar. And sometimes the practical resolution, right, is, in that moment is wearing pants or like, just doing something that's like can seem so simple and so kind of mundane, but it's going to help you just chill out and relax about the situation or the symptom And that's ultimately like the intention for learning this stuff is like it's not to, right, always need to figure everything out and get like so neurotic and go down every rabbit hole, which you know, we can all do to some extent. But sometimes like that can actually be really unhelpful, because then you're spending so much time and energy focusing on the thing that you don't want, instead of just like, oh, how can I relax about this? How can I laugh about this? How can I just like just let it go, you know? And that looks different for every conflict and every person and situation. But yeah, sometimes it's as simple in that moment of like, okay, just wear pants. um and yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I really enjoyed hearing all your stories. And I think everyone else will also.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, to reiterate what Abigail said, it's great to have you, Laura. And we will be linking Laura's social media and website in the show notes, so you can find her, you can follow her, and check out what she's doing.
We hope you enjoyed today's conversation. We appreciate you being here.
If you would like some additional support in navigating your health symptoms, we both provide coaching services from a German New Medicine perspective.
Our Instagram handles and personal websites are linked in the podcast description.